Welcome into the OBR streaming network. This is a brand new edition of The React. Glad to see you filing into the chat. Glad that you could make it here tonight to talk all things Browns as we look to regroup and head into a week 4 matchup with the Las Vegas Raiders. Tonight with me, as always, the always fantastic Pete Smith. Follow him on Twitter at _Pete Smith _. What is happening, Pete?
Not a whole lot. I mean, feels like this week is going slow for some reason, but yeah,
Yes.
Browns have to bounce back. There's no shortage of areas where they can improve, but there is a lot of season left, and that's the only mindset that they can roll with.
Yeah, lots of football to be played. 14 more games for the boys to try to turn it around. It's kind of a mess right now. It's getting hot out there as far as some of the heat coming down on Deshaun. We'll address a lot of it tonight. Let's start, though, with kind of where they are injury-wise along the offensive line, Pete. You know, Wyatt Teller to the IR. No Wills, no Conklin at practice today. Myles Garrett, a DNP with a foot, Achilles, and a thigh. Unreal. And then, from there, you don't really know. I guess they called up Fetty, right? So what do you think their plan is for the offensive line at this point? Any clue?
Well, I mean, I suspect they're desperately hoping that Wills or Conklin will be ready to go.
Yeah.
Ideally both. DeJuan Jones, I suspect, will play. Hopefully his knee can recover because he was clearly laboring on it Sunday. And then it's Zinter time. And as much as I am disappointed in the Teller injury, I am curious to see what Zach Zinter does. He was pretty decent for jumping in there in the scenario he's put in there for a guy who, to me, did not look ready as a run blocker in the preseason. He did a nice job in pass protection. And the other part that's sort of interesting to me is and we'll see where it goes. I mean, he may suddenly struggle this week, but he is the guy, along with sort of Javion Cohen and Lorenzo Thompson, that were brought in as rookies under this staff. And if he's sort of already getting it in terms of what they need from this group, that is sort of an indication that part is at least working. So if he can be a positive, that is certainly good news for the Browns. As long as he can make it through, that the only thing that really bugs me about it is obviously if he gets hurt or Bitonio gets hurt, then you are really screwed at that point because he's your one backup. Now Cohen may be called up this week to sort of be a backup since we're still nowhere with Michael Dunn, or they can do what they did last week and just kick Posick over to guard and put in Nick Harris at center. Not a great scenario, but so I'm curious to see what Zinter can do. But obviously, the Browns being so low on guys already, that part is certainly worrying.
Yeah, I had a question about Nick Harris, actually. So the Browns centers call out protections. Did you think he did a good job when he came in at the end of the game on Sunday?
I mean, I think the Giants had sort of, after being super blitz heavy in the first half and sort of getting a lead, I think they reverted back to their normal defense in the second half, which made it sort of easier to call out protections. But he's a smart guy. I don't doubt that there were. I don't doubt that that he did a good job. I mean, it's just really tough when you're facing all these twists and stunts and all these other things. But to me, certainly the protections are important in terms of sort of being able to call out the blitzes and stuff. But I'm more concerned with the center calling out the run calls than anything else, because there's more more of an adjustment in terms of where guys have to go as opposed to sort of reading and reacting. Now, certainly, if you're shifting your protection one way or the other, it becomes more relevant, but it's hard for me to differentiate too much. I felt like Posick did a good job last year. So I don't know if there's a comparable difference at this point other than, one, Posick is not playing well, and neither were the tackles. And so you were basically at two guards trying to make this whole thing work, and that's not gonna get it done.
In as quickly and overarching as you can, Pete, how do we fix this?
Play better.
Play better.
Here's the thing: like when you practice each week, certainly I think overarching, there are certain things you want to sort of improve. There may be one thing you sort of want to improve, whether it's the run game or whatever, but like you can get a lot done in a week in terms of progressing from one week to the next, which is why the NFL in particular is such a week-to-week league. Just in terms of doing a better job in terms of communicating or, run blocking or some of the other things that they're trying to do, pass protection, all that stuff. There's a lot that can improve. Obviously, one of the things that that we sort of knew was going to be an issue in terms of growing pains was going to be the whole choice routes and all that stuff, because there is a little bit of trust that goes into that. Obviously, if you aren't doing that, then it's just receiver goes here and the quarterback just has to go. And granted, there were still reads in there. Obviously, last year, Cedric Tillman did not do a good job with those reads, which is where there were some miscommunications on that. But there is more empowerment of the receivers. So there's two people that on more situations where it's how do you expect this to play out? And those miscommunications can look really bad and make, I think, in this circumstance, make Watson look far, or whoever's a quarterback, make them look far worse than maybe they are in a given rep. So that part needs to improve. Obviously, the quarterback in general needs to get the ball out faster, and the Browns coaching staff needs to provide options to do that are going to be beneficial. So it's a lot of things that have to work and a lot of things that have to get better. But I don't think all of these things are gigantic tasks, other than the fact that you are not going to suddenly get bigger, faster, stronger. It comes down to details. It comes down to answers, and it comes down to mental things and execution and chemistry, and those things can improve pretty quickly. Obviously, they need to have a good week of practice. Not having guys practice is not helpful for that. They can do walkthroughs, which can be beneficial. They can do meetings, which can be beneficial. But obviously, reps are going to play a bigger role on that. So those are all things that need to sort of just progress. And we came out of that Jacksonville game thinking, oh, the Browns can get on track, and they got destroyed by a very talented Giants front, which was not helpful. And obviously, Shane Bowen did a phenomenal job with his game plan that went against type, which he deserves a ton of credit, as do the players on the Giants, because Mike Vrabel was his head coach, who had him as an outside linebackers coach and defensive coordinator. Jim Schwartz was in Tennessee with him. They know this guy, and yet he was able to come out and run a completely out-of-character defense by going more man coverage and heavy blitz. Basically just ran Jim Schwartz's defense in a lot of ways. And the Browns were completely caught by surprise, both in terms of the coaching staff and Watson and the protection. And I think they needed to do a better job of coming up with answers faster than they did. Now, ultimately, they were able to do that in the second half, but it took too long. The game progresses that quickly. Halftime adjustments aren't a thing. They are in-game adjustments. Everybody's on video. Everybody can see what's going on. It's the next series. It's even later in the drive, if the Browns can ever put one together. You can see these things happening, and you can make that adjustment on the fly.
Yeah. Dable had a nice game plan as well for the offense that kind of exploited them. So kind of out-coached, out-prepared in that one. So, all right, let's go to thank you guys all for tuning in tonight. Make sure you hit like and subscribe. It only takes a second. It doesn't cost you a cent, and it helps us out greatly. If you're watching on X, hop on over to youtube.com/Orange and Brown Report and keep it locked over at the OBR.com all week as we get you ready for the Raiders. Let's get into video one. This is an interesting one as Adam the Bull, on his own podcast. It's called The Bullpen with Ron Rivera. Good guest for Bull here. But hear Ron's thoughts on some of what's going on here, which are interesting.
And he is a good teammate.
Here in Cleveland, the Browns, as you know, have been looking for a quarterback forever. I think a lot of fans thought the Browns had it with Baker Mayfield. He had an up and down 4 years, 1 year good, 1 year bad. The Browns decide to move on. They get the opportunity to get Deshaun Watson. When that happened at the time, I and most of Cleveland were, thought we hit the lottery because Deshaun Watson in Houston looked like he was as good as any quarterback not named Patrick Mahomes there for a while. And obviously it hasn't gone particularly well here in Cleveland, the suspensions, the injuries. What do you make, Coach, of Deshaun Watson and what's gone on for him the last few years? And what are you expecting from him on the field going forward?
Well, what's interesting about him is he was a terrific talent. He really was. Did a lot of good things in college football, got an opportunity, and really kind of moved forward and was headed in that direction. Then the biggest thing that has sidetracked him, and you guys know it better than anybody, has been what has happened off the field. I mean, those are things that really do affect a player. It affects the people around him, and it affects the team itself, and it affects the community. And those are hard things. And every time something else comes up, becomes that distraction. Believe me, I dealt with it for 4 seasons. These last 4 seasons have been the hardest 4 seasons I've ever had as a coach. And a lot of it had to do with things that didn't occur on the field as much as it was happening off the field.
Right.
And believe me, that distraction does play into a lot of things for a lot of people. It really does. And I think that's the biggest thing. If there was ever a way to just put everything that's happened to him off to the side and let the young man just focus in on playing football, let his teammates only have to answer questions that dealt with football. You know what I'm saying? I mean, That's the hard part, is when you have to answer something that has nothing to do with you. When they say, well, what do you think about what happened with him? What's going on? That's taking you away from what you want to focus on. I mean, trust me, I know 4 years of it, of answering questions that really had nothing to do with my time there. And that was difficult because now I've got to try and control it and keep it out of my locker room. And the first questions that you always get from specific media people, especially those that aren't there to cover the sports, but are there to sensationalize what's happened, they come out with those questions. I mean, we didn't just have sports reporters in our locker room. We were having the daily news reporters coming in, trying to create more news, and that was tough. I mean, it really was. I mean, I understand those are serious things, but we weren't part of it. We were just innocent collateral damage in terms of having to deal with answering those questions.
Yeah, and that sucks. I mean, in the Browns case, at least it was a player. So, you understand why the question is being asked. Whereas in your case, it's the owner that's, causing the distraction for the team, and that's unfortunate. When you see Deshaun Watson play, is that guy still there? Is that special talent still there?
It is, because, I sometimes I watch him and I think to myself, guys, he's trying to be a prolific style quarterback. He's trying to stay in the pocket. His superpower is playing on the move. Mm-hmm. Okay, it's like it's like last night you watched Jaden Daniels. Again, he's a young quarterback. I get it, but what he's done though is he's kind of adapted to the speed of the game a lot quicker than some of the other young guys have. And so you watch him play. He's got a clock in his head that goes off at the right time, and then he uses his superpower. He starts to move. When that young man starts to moving, it changes what defenses can do. I mean, last night they didn't play a lot of man coverage in Cincinnati. They looked like they played a lot of zone to me, and what that did was it gave him the opportunity to extend plays. Why? Because they're rushing 4. They're not bringing a lot of pressure. Okay, so he had a chance to stand back there, look at things, and when things broke down, he took off and ran. I mean, that's I think what you're getting with a guy like Deshaun is that if he can stick to the things that I think that he does very well, and that's he throws well on the move. He can extend a play with his legs. Okay, keeping his eyes downfield, he can get the ball downfield. I think there's still that guy there. It's just that for whatever reason, sometimes it looks like me is like he wants to stay in the pocket and be prolific.
Coach.
All right. He wants to stay in the pocket and be prolific. To me, it looks like he's getting out of the pocket as soon as he possibly can.
Well, he keeps saying he wants to stay in the pocket. I think he wants to operate from the pocket. I think the Browns offense sort of wants him to operate from the pocket. And I don't think I think using his legs as a secondary option is the way that it has to be. I don't think it can be his primary threat. I don't think he's that special moving. Now, his strength is remarkable. He is able to shake off guys. He shook off Micah Parsons. I mean, that's remarkable ability to do that. But, he has processed the game faster when he was with the Texans. I wrote about this for today. His clock was faster, and whether that is, I think he does have to process quicker. I think the ball has to come out faster, and against the Giants, that was the fastest he's ever had the ball come out against the Giants, and he was sacked 8 times, which to me shows just how ridiculous of a situation that was. That doesn't mean Deshaun Watson's good or anything else. It just means I think that was an unwinnable situation. Having said that, I think that's the thing that's got to be. I think he averaged 2.69 seconds time to throw, which includes the amount of times where he's trying to extend plays, which would suggest it's even faster than that. But I think that is a good metric for him to sort of be working around. I don't want him to have the ball for 3 seconds. One, I don't think it's realistic considering where their protection's at. Maybe it will get better, but at least right now, I don't think that's realistic. He mentioned Jaden Daniels. Jaden Daniels is one of the 3 quarterbacks who on the season averages a faster time than Deshaun Watson had on Sunday. And they have answers. He gets the ball out very fast. Cliff Kingsbury, who I have been very critical of in the past, is doing a phenomenal job with the Commanders' offense. But I think it's got to get to that point. Now, Watson's not the only person involved in that. Obviously, the coaching staff's part of that, and then the receivers are part of that. But, there are too many times in general, and I don't think the Giants game was a great example, but there are too many times where we're seeing open receivers and the ball's not getting out. And that's got to happen. And some of that happens when you don't trust your protection because you are getting killed, which is where I sort of look at that game and go, you can break, and I know Deshaun Watson sort of touched on this in his press conference where he's talking about, the frozen images and this. I do think if you look at particular plays in a film room context, you will, looking at that game, you will come out with a lot of plays where he looked bad. And Sam Penix did a great job of looking at this. But I do think at some point you do have to consider the fact he's taken however many hits, the 8 sacks plus how many other hits, and what that is ultimately going to do to a person over the course of the game, as opposed to if he was never touched, I suspect, we'd see different results. But I do think that's where it's got to be. And then the legs become a secondary option when the opportunity is there. But there are things where I think he's got to do a better job. I think he's doing a slightly better job. Dallas was awful in terms of pocket movement and making things worse. But that's where I do think being in the pocket is good for him. Getting the ball out cleanly is good for him because then it does create the opportunity for him then to use his legs. Because if you can consistently get the ball out fast, it negates the pass rush. And then you can start to do things like extend because the defense isn't so accustomed to it. That's where I sort of look at it. I understand where Ron Rivera's coming from in terms of there are times when you can see Deshaun Watson's elite ability. There are individual plays where you can go, wow, that was a great play. But over the course of any amount of time, handful of plays, game, whatever, to this point, his best is average. His best, and I think he was average against the Giants. He needs to be more consistent. He needs to get going. Now, I think Deshaun Watson will make the argument that he will continue to get better the longer he's able to play. But it's got to be on time. It's got to be faster. It's got to get the ball out of his hands quicker to do that, because otherwise he will not survive. I mean, he's tough. He's very strong, very tough. But at some point, somebody's get him weird, and it's going to do something. And I know he's not showing any ill effects, but it's going to add up. He's on a ridiculous pace in terms of the hits he's taking and all this other stuff. So they've got to get that figured out. And the less he's hit, the easier it's going to be for him to trust his protection, focus on everything down the field, and not dropping his eyes and those type of things, which will get him in trouble. But the processing's got to be there. He has done it before. To this point, it has not happened in Cleveland. It's fair to wonder if it's ever going to come back. But if it's going to happen, it needs to happen very soon, preferably 3 weeks ago. But Sunday would also be helpful against the Raiders, because it's not going to work the way it's going. It's got to improve fast.
Yeah, I think the one play that sticks out to me, and a couple of people have broken it down online, including Orlovsky, and I think that it was in Sam's film room as well, is the strip sack fumble, right? Although he had zero time and DeJuan was smoked off the line of scrimmage, Jerry Jeudy was open. He had a set, he sees him, he's looking right at him, he hitches, he pats the ball, he hitches, and then he goes to throw, and the ball is stripped. Whereas you see him open, throw the ball, as Dan was saying in his breakdown, and Sam, the ball should be gone here. He's clearly open. The ball needs to be out. And I think on the All-22, there's a lot of that at times.
Well, I mean, enough of it. There's enough to say, like, it's not good enough. And it's not realistic given the circumstances. If he had excellent protection, if Juwan Jones has a healthy knee and he's able to push that edge, Kayvon Thibodeau all the way around, and he's able to hitch and get away with it and get the ball out and complete it, fine. But just in terms of a passing process, in terms of what is supposed to happen, in terms of what the coaching staff wants to see, what Watson wants to see, it's get to that spot, balls out, and it's a non-issue. I agree with that, and that's where Watson's losing the argument in terms of making the case that he's the answer. Those things have to improve quickly. And if the Browns were playing elite defense and they efforted out, a tough, gritty 15-12 win against the Giants as opposed to losing, he'd get a little bit more rope in terms of, okay, it's not going great, but they're winning. But when they're losing and it feels like there's pressure adding up and these other things, like, it makes it easier to give into that urge of this has to, we've got to do something. But ultimately, he's got to make those improvements if he wants to be the quarterback going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, we're going to go on to, actually, this is going to be right on topic here. This is unsportsmanlike conduct. This is a shorter clip, but them talking about Deshaun, and an interesting clip here. Just grabbed this one right before the show. So here we go.
He's blaming the offensive line for the Browns. Oh, they're not as good as they were last year. Fine. Watch the game. You're supposed to step up into the pocket when the rush is coming from the side. Mm-hmm. Deshaun Watson has this unique ability, not stepping up in the pocket, stepping up into the rush. I've never seen anything like. He almost steps sideways into the oncoming defender. He has zero football feel whatsoever. I thought they should have benched him at halftime for Jameis Winston. I can't believe I'm saying that out loud.
You can't bench him, no, Ev. You're on the hook for that contract for 2 more seasons after this year.
I got to get wins now, though.
Yeah, I don't know how. You have to go with Deshaun Watson. You can't show that you're losing confidence in the guy when you owe him over $100 million.
I got to admit to one other thing. I was blatantly wrong on one thing.
What's up?
So obviously, I'm probably going to be wrong about them going to the Super Bowl if the Chiefs don't. But there's still time.
No.
There's still time. Here's what I was wrong about.
I think we're good.
I think we're solid on that one, bro.
Fair. But here's what I was wrong about. I said you could not bring back Joe Flacco because if you brought back Joe Flacco, it would decrease the confidence that Watson had, and you had to empower him to be the leader of your team. They didn't bring back Joe Flacco, and he still stinks.
Yeah.
It would be nice for them to go to Joe Flacco right now.
Okay, so I disagree with the assessment they should have gone to Jameis Winston at halftime. And I honestly don't care if they bench Deshaun Watson and say Jameis Winston's going to start this week. But again, I think I don't think that was a winning situation for any quarterback. And I even talked about Joe Flacco relative when I wrote about this for today. Joe Flacco probably dies in that game. I went back and I looked at his average. And again, 2.69 was the time to throw for Watson. Flacco had one game below that. It was against Jacksonville. Everything else was above it. And yes, the offense is different. And maybe if Joe Flacco knows all this pressure is coming, he gets rid of it a little quicker. But Joe Flacco actually had been getting rid of the ball faster before he got to Cleveland and actually slowed down. But even if he doesn't get sacked 8 times, like let's say Joe Flacco plays the whole game, he may not get sacked 8 times. He's going to get decked. He's going to get hit a lot. And we saw this against the Rams last year, where he did take a lot of hits and he was awful in that game. And ultimately, he started looking very much like a 40-year-old man at quarterback at the end of that game, where he's just sort of looked like, I don't want to be here anymore. I think that would have been death. The other part for that is Jameis Winston actually processes faster than Joe Flacco, which I was surprised by when I looked that up. Jameis Winston actually gets the ball out quicker than Flacco, which is sort of interesting to me because if you do make the switch, it seems like Winston is actually capable. And I can't help but wonder if that's part of the reason the Browns brought him in, is that he did get rid of the ball faster than Joe Flacco, in addition to being a decade younger, in addition to having more mobility than Joe Flacco, in addition to having the other things that they liked about him. And obviously, yes, I agree with even though I disagree with the notion that Watson had anything to do, specifically Watson saying to the organization, I don't want Joe Flacco back. I think that's crap. But I do think the Browns sort of looked at this and go, we don't want to deal with this as a potential issue. Yeah. But I do think, if the Browns decide that Watson can't, I don't care about the money, and I don't think the Browns do either. I think they want to win football games. I think they still believe that Watson can sort of reclaim the player he was. Again, I don't know how realistic that is. I don't know what they're basing it on. I wasn't at practice every day to say, hey, I'm not in those meetings to go to listen to the argument. But I think if you get to that point, and again, I don't care. If they want to bring in Winston this week, fine. Or next week, whatever. But ultimately, I do think there is a path forward with Winston. Now, is that going to be great outcome? Hard to say. Winston has his own sort of, volatility and issues that obviously Flacco did last year with the Browns. I mean, obviously Joe Flacco was very good in terms of jolting the offense. They scored a lot of points, but they obviously had a whole lot of turnovers. And that hurt, they scored a lot of points, but they were obviously in a lot of slugfest because they turned over the ball a whole lot. So Jameis Winston in some ways goes even more extreme both directions in terms of more big plays, but potentially more turnovers. So we'll see what happens, but I disagree with the notion that they should have benched him. I disagree with the notion that the money is that big of a factor at this point. I think the Browns organization looks at this as a sunk cost. I think the Browns are very quietly rooting for an excuse to void the contract.
Yeah.
I think they would love nothing more than to be able to move on from that and, move on from Watson after this year, unless things change dramatically. And even if that were to happen, they could just renegotiate the contract or cut him, whatever. But no, I don't believe in any of that stuff as far as that goes. So I think the Browns are I would hope the Browns are being honest with themselves and asking themselves questions in terms of coming out of this game and going, who would give us the best chance to win in that circumstance? Who gives us the best chance to win under these circumstances? If Watson cannot do A, B, and C, are we better off with Jameis Winston? And again, I look at the Giants game and I go, the protection was ridiculously bad, and the receivers were not great either. And the coaching staff probably also saying to themselves, we weren't very good either. So these are all factors of why we're not making a move. But, I would hope we're not coming out of the Raiders game and saying the same things, where we're sitting there going, man, the protection was this bad and the receivers were not good and we can't run the ball at all again. And the game plan wasn't good, because at that point, as I sort of said coming out of this game, Watson was not the problem. That is the problem. Like before, the premise of this whole season was the Browns are going to get elite defense. The Browns are going to have really good receivers. They're going to have a strong offensive line. Even if there were questions there, it was going to be better than it is. And that if Watson was just average, the Browns would be in great shape, not only a lock for the playoffs, but competing for a division and potentially a problem in the postseason for opponents. To me, Watson was average in this Giants game, and nothing else, almost nothing else was, which sort of underscores the issues that are across the board, and that is ultimately not going to be sustainable for anybody.
Okay. So you think he was average in this game? There are some numbers out there, just to push back a little bit, that are starkly like he is the second to worst quarterback through 3 weeks in the entire NFL in EPA, next to Bryce Young, right? In the new Browns era of quarterbacks, all the way from 2000 to 2024, his performance so far this year is the worst EPA per play yet of any quarterback that has started for the Browns. Like, those are shocking numbers, not even close to average. What would you say to that?
I agree with that. Those numbers are horrific. I think in terms of the Giants game, that is a team stat. Yes, Deshaun Watson had plays he needed to make. That would have been the difference between average and good. Certainly, he has to own one of the plays we're going to talk about later, which is on him. And ultimately, there are plays you look at where you go, you can point to that and go, this is why I think the Browns need to bench Deshaun Watson. Undoubtedly the case. But just from an effort standpoint, in all the circumstances he was dealing with, there were plays like he obviously makes the throw to Amari Cooper for the touchdown. They score again on a drive that he largely had to engineer himself again. And then we get to a point where he's putting balls on guys and they can't catch it when they have to have it, or his protection has completely failed him, or they cannot run the ball at all. Like, at some point, all of those statistics look awful, and they are, but something you can't. At what point are we saying that like everything is his fault for this particular game? Because I think Dallas, he has to own all of it. He was awful against the Dallas Cowboys. Like, he was every bit that bad that those numbers suggest. And I think he was largely fine against the Jaguars. But I think just relative to that Giants performance, that is a team-wide stat as opposed to just a quarterback stat. And it's awful. But the Browns offense in that game was genuinely awful for 59 minutes.
Yeah, I agree. There's one sequence. I'll wait till it comes up. There's one sequence that stood out to me in that game as the oh my gosh. But yeah, we'll wait on that. This is an interesting little clip. I've never heard of this before. Maybe you have, Pete. McCready and Siski maybe a radio show here with AJ McCarron every Monday, right? So AJ McCarron, of all people, hops in, and a former, I believe, was he his backup in Houston? He talks like he is.
I don't think he was ever with them. AJ
Okay.
McCarron was obviously Hugh Jackson's crush,
Right.
and was with
He
the Bengals. I
talks
don't
like
know.
he was.
I don't know. I know about it. He's a restaurateur, and his concept was one of the worst things I've ever heard of. I don't know if it's. I have no idea about if he was ever with the Texans.
Okay. Well, here we go. With his thoughts on the Browns and Deshaun here.
They were getting beat handedly, bad. And really and truly, you've only had your one win is versus a Browns team that is just struggling bad.
Dog. No, I can't. I knew that's why I didn't do it. Everybody was hyping them preseason. I mean, I don't know. Dude, they're terrible.
Listen, I just, and I, like I said, everybody knows this. Deshaun's one of my good friends. I told Deshaun during that, I did not think that offense fit him well. It was a night and day difference. I've been in Stefanski's offense, or style of offense before. The lingo, the concepts, how much you're under center.
All right. I'm calling BS. I don't think AJ McCarron told Deshaun when he was in the middle of his thing. I don't think he called him up and said, I don't think you should go to Cleveland, Deshaun. I don't think you're going to like their offense. Sorry. Calling BS.
I was going to say, I imagine AJ McCarron must have been in a Kubiak style offense at some point, because that's obviously the derivation of this whole thing. Kubiak / Shanahan style stuff. I mean, I would just point out that AJ McCarron is not in the league anymore. And that's probably part of the reason why, because you couldn't do things like under center and playing a good offense. Now, having said that, it's possible that that Deshaun Watson wasn't a good fit in Kevin Stefanski's offense, but it's a good thing that they changed it to an offense that fits him more effectively. He's just not doing it. I think this is what happens when you get into and I hear this a lot. To me, I think it's lazy analysis. I think it's a very easy way to sort of generalize and come up with its overall arching thing, as opposed to getting in there and actually looking at what's happening on the field. Because here's the thing. Kevin Stefanski had a pre-existing relationship with Quincy Avery. Quincy Avery was one of the people who was pushing Deshaun Watson, obviously, who knows him really well. Thought it was a good fit for him in Cleveland, has sung Kevin Stefanski's praises in Cleveland, has thought this was a good fit for Deshaun Watson in Cleveland. And ultimately, he's not playing well. So we can come up with these broad generalizations about what he doesn't fit in. I don't think this is analogous to Jeff Garcia coming to Cleveland and playing in Butch Davis style offense. I don't think those things are remotely similar. I think Kevin Stefanski keep in mind, any quarterback that's operated in Kevin Stefanski's offense has the right throughout the week to say, I don't want to run this.
Yeah.
So Deshaun Watson is signing off on these plays. He had help. He had a voice in developing the offense with Ken Dorsey and Kevin Stefanski all offseason. No, these are things where you have to, he had agency in this whole process. He has agency on a weekly basis. This is crap. Play better. I mean, it's just play better. You helped design this thing. So you're basically saying he can't fit in an offense he helped design. He can't help in an offense where he's picking some of the concepts he wants to run. That is the ultimate cop-out. Deshaun Watson, as he's currently playing, is not going to succeed in the NFL. And a lot of this has to do with what the NFL has done. And I've written about this. I will continue to talk about this. 2020 and 2024 are different worlds in the NFL.
Yeah.
2020, the NFL was not nearly as fast as it is in 2024. And I pointed this out in relation to the Cowboys game, where Deshaun Watson at one point is rolling to his right, and he has all kinds of green grass in front of him. And you're sitting there going, wow, he's got a lot of space. DeMarvion Overshown of the Dallas Cowboys doesn't just tackle him. He sacks him because he's so fast. What is happening? And this is sort of a trend that started since Deshaun Watson has not been playing. The Browns drafted JOK in 2021. DeMarvion Overshown, Devin Bush. The NFL, particularly at the second level, is getting smaller and faster, which is why you're starting to see teams try to do the Jim Harbaugh Stanford reaction to the Pac-12, where they're trying to get bigger, muscled up linemen and run the ball harder. Now, they're struggling to do this because there are just not that many offensive linemen that are good, and there's a whole lot of reasons I've written about as to why this is the case. But it's not surprising to me whatsoever that the first thing Jim Harbaugh did when he got his new job was draft a tackle. The Browns, I think, saw this coming in some respects by drafting a Jim Harbaugh coached Zach Zinter. Like, they want to get to the point where they can muscle people off the ball. I suspect that, this coming off season is going to be hugely investing in the offensive line again to rebuild and sort of get this thing going. But beyond that, you've also got this the change of teams are running cover 2 and cover 3 where they are playing way back, and they're basically getting into a position where they are not going to get beat over the top. And at the same time, they're far enough back that they can break downhill as fast as they can and tackle receivers underneath and try to limit yards after the catch. And it looks a lot like what the Browns did last year when they were just cruising on defense.
Yeah.
Where the Browns would just, teams would throw the ball underneath and suddenly you had a guy flying downhill and immediately tackling him. Or it felt like the Browns had 15 guys on the field because there was always somebody swarming around. I think that's a lot of what's happening. And that is causing some of these quarterbacks to have to make a serious adjustment. And we are seeing different quarterbacks succeed in this new NFL. Some of them are just experienced guys who have played a ton of football and understand what it looks like and processing at a high level. And I wrote this before Andy Dalton comes out and picks apart the Raiders defense, where he's getting rid of the ball at an average time to throw of 2.03 seconds, which is astonishingly fast. And he was like 27 of 29 and whatever. And he was sacked twice in that game. But he's doing really well. Sam Darnold is doing really well. You're seeing a lot, obviously the Patrick Mahomes is not playing like Patrick Mahomes we expect, but he's still one of the better quarterbacks in the league. Josh Allen is crushing it. Like, the great quarterbacks are still great. But that second tier of guys is shuffling. Geno Smith is succeeding really well. Again, guys who are sort of like right at about 30, in that young 30s area, who are able to process information really well, are succeeding right now. Now, it's only 3 games in. Offenses may catch up, and some of these other quarterbacks may figure things out. Defenses may adjust and start figuring out how to take Sam Darnold. Sam Darnold's had these kinds of runs before, and then all of a sudden he turns back into a pumpkin. So there's a lot of things going on where I think Ron Rivera had a point in terms of the off-field stuff, but I just think the NFL that Deshaun Watson is playing in now is entirely different from the one he was playing in 2020. And I think he's having a difficult time adjusting to it. A lot of people are, but obviously I think the Browns have obviously struggled the most, basically of anybody. And it's disappointing in a lot of respects because I think they understood, again, I point to Zinter, but I think they understood even with the coaching staff moves of what was going to happen in terms of the shifting landscape, and they tried to get ahead of it. And obviously it's not where it needs to be. Now, if they get it going and they can start figuring some of these things out, if they can come up with better answers, I really like their run concepts. I like what they want to do in the running game. I just wish they were more successful at it, because Jerome Ford looks like a much better player this year. And I think a lot of that comes down to how they're giving him the ball and where he's able to see running lanes and the different blocking concepts they're using. They're not asking DeJuan Jones to block wide zone, which was stupid when they were doing it last year. They're asking him to do a lot of down blocking, a lot of double teams, a lot of things that make more sense. I think it makes a lot of sense. I just think they need to obviously do it better. but I do think the offense makes a lot of sense for what they're trying to do in the current landscape. There are certainly things that have to get better, but that part of it I don't worry about. Likewise, I'm not worried about the offensive line coach. The offensive line coach did not injure DeJuan Jones's knee. He did not injure Jedrick Wills again. He did not make Ethan Posick suck, because Ethan Posick sucked last year. A lot of these guys sucked last year, and we are conveniently forgetting that they sucked last year, and we were constantly complaining about the running game last year, and all of a sudden we're going, well, Bill Callahan's gone. What happened to the offensive line? It's the same offensive line. It's just hurt or injured out entirely, and we're seeing new guys come in. It's a different landscape, but like, we are romanticizing what Bill Callahan has been able to do, and even so, under the circumstances where they were having Jerron Christian, some of these other guys come in and they were winning and fighting just enough. But like, again, let's go back to that Ravens game, week 10. There was a sack that should have ended that game because the offensive line got destroyed. So the coaching staff, I'm not worried about. I want to see them get it going. I want to see the plans make more sense. I want them to have better answers. But at the same point, I'm still not sitting here going, man, they really dropped the ball by letting freaking Stump Mitchell walk out the door. They really they really dropped the ball by not demanding that Brian Callahan and the Tennessee Titans gave up a first-round pick for Bill Callahan. Like, come on.
Yeah, no, and you're absolutely right. I mean, as much agency as Watson has had in this, I mean, you just got to do it at some point. So, all right, here we go. A little more.
Play action pass is not what we did in Houston. Is not what made Deshaun successful in Houston. And I don't think he's comfortable in that offense. I really don't. He's comfortable going home and looking at the bank account and laying in bed. He ain't struggling for that. So I mean, hell, I don't know how much you're worrying, really and truly, but I
was thinking how nice it would be to have that much money.
Here again, Quincy Avery talking about them taking concepts directly from Houston and putting it in Cleveland's offense. Like this is where it's baseless. Now, this year it's potentially different, but I know this from the last 2 years. There were concepts they took directly from the Houston Texans. Deshaun Watson has said such himself that they're saying we did this in Houston. He's called some of these concepts out by name that they're doing. Yeah. It's just not playing well. Like, again, it just feels like a giant cop out. And I've tried to be as dispassionate in terms of Deshaun the person to Deshaun the quarterback as possible, and get yelled at plenty for it. But like, there's a point where I cannot go. Like, figure it out. Like, this is stupid. We are.
Yep.
He cannot be so specialized that he can only operate this one thing. Because one, the Browns have done it and he still can't do it. And two, like, he's been doing this for months. Like, at what point is it going to happen? Like, so many of these things are the changes they made. Obviously the run stuff and the evolving the offense, you and I have talked about this, had to happen regardless of Deshaun Watson. But at the same time, they've matched it to their personnel, which is what you should do. And that includes the offensive line and Jerome Ford and some of the other things. But obviously Deshaun's your quarterback, so you match it to him as well. And again, he's had agency in making these determinations. So this idea that that Deshaun is running things he's not comfortable with is asinine, given the fact he's the one signing off on it.
Yeah, no, they changed everything for him. Everything. I mean, the offense that McCarron is talking about here is not. I mean, while there are staples of it at times, it's not the same anymore. They have given him every opportunity to make this his show and make him as comfortable as possible.
Not playing well right now. And they have a really good defense. They've always had a good defense. But
when you see someone as talented as he is, all the jokes
always
the guy
always
is
about a
immensely
year
talented. When you see someone as talented as he is, who's had success before, struggle the way he's struggling, you do have to wonder. It's so easy for people to go, well, he sucks, so he all of a sudden sucks.
No.
Like that, no, there's a fit thing, right? It's pretty obvious. Fit matters. It matters a ton in life, really. But obviously for a quarterback in a system, if you're not comfortable, you're not going to play well. And
that's the thing that gets me, not to cut you off, Neil, but it blows my mind with Kevin is why he won't change some of his concepts, and people shit on OB. But I tell you one damn thing that Bill O'Brien would.
He changed everything.
Yeah, I mean, again, when Watson's, it feels like McCarron should listen to the Lockerverse podcast thing because they talked about it all off season, about all the things that, how good they felt, how much they loved the offense, how much they loved Kevin, how much they were excited about the hire of Ken Dorsey, this, that, and the other thing. Like, stop it. It's crap. You're either not paying attention or you don't want to, but like
he's clearly not paying attention. Yeah.
It's not based in reality.
He would find whatever you needed to be successful. He didn't give a shit if it was his way or not. Now, once he started calling it, you better be, and he has to change his ways. It better be successful, or somebody's getting their ass whooped. He's going to be pissed off. But he would take advice. And early in Deshaun's career, they had people tell him, said, hey, you got to change this offense. It's not New England style. It's not going to be Tom. Deshaun's not up there changing Mike points a ton and getting you in and out of plays. Put him in a successful offense, run his stuff that he did at Clemson. And they had a big offseason after his first year starting where they came together. They would go and visit Clemson as a staff, and they would sit down and learn this offense and learn concepts and figure out ways to mesh it into their offense.
Okay, pause.
And that's what we did. Like,
Clemson's offense sucked. I'll just tell you straight up, sucked. Clemson's offense is a real big reason Trevor Lawrence is not developed in the NFL. It stunk. It did not help him in a lot of ways. And what's funny about this is Quincy Avery's actually talked about this at length, I believe. I could be mistaken on that, but I'm fairly sure he's talked about how like Clemson has done a whole lot of things to stunt the growth of quarterbacks with Trevor Lawrence and DJ Ugalele, whatever he is. Like, that is not a good place to start and go, well, Clemson's offense. No. Deshaun Watson was phenomenal in college, and they had talent. Yeah. That is what the secret sauce was. And certainly they may have tailored things to his strengths, as they should, but overall it was a high school offense. Straight up. Like, they did not ask him. They did not ask their guys to throw like passes over intermediate areas of the field. It was all way outside, or like, it was not a good offense, and has done a lot of damage to quarterbacks who have come out of there, which is why some of them aren't going there anymore. And they had to change it up, and they brought in this whole new coordinator who's gotten a lot more control. No, Clemson's offense was bad, and you can find tweets of me criticizing it way back when Trevor Lawrence was coming out, because there were things that he was never asked to do, and I had some real questions about his viability. Not that he wasn't going to be necessarily talented, but I just wondered if Clemson was doing him a disservice in terms of what he was being asked to do. And I to this point, I believe that 100% it was doing him a disservice, and it did not help him prepare for the NFL. And obviously, look, at the end of the day, and again, I talked about this in terms of writing about offensive line development. Coaches are paid to win games. They are not paid to develop. Ultimately, they want to win games because that's how they keep their jobs. That's how they get better jobs. That's how they get more money. So you're going to do things that are going to be the best for your team and help you win, as opposed to necessarily taking time to do everything you can to develop the quarterback as best as possible. So ultimately, that's what Clemson did. They won a national championship. They had obviously had a ton of talent walk through there. They had a tremendous run. But no, that offense was not good for the quarterback position in general. Put up a lot of numbers, but has obviously had trouble in the NFL. Obviously, Deshaun Watson was hugely successful before his issues off the field and the suspension and his own self chosen holdout situation with them.
Yeah.
But like, I can't. AJ McCarron has played a hell of a lot more quarterback than I have, but I cannot agree with much of anything he's saying on this. And I think
No.
it screams to me of a guy who's not actually watching this,
Yes.
or I should say, he's probably watching the games. I should say just that he didn't pay attention to the offseason. He's not paying attention to what was actually happening in Cleveland. We have the advantage he does not. And if he's trying to be a national guy and potentially still a restaurateur, then his focus is elsewhere. Fine. But he does not have all the information, and he's just flat wrong on that.
Yeah, he is.
My 2 years in Houston, even our second year, we absolutely sucked. I mean, we were terrible. I think we won 2 or 3 games, 4 games all year. We were awful. Yeah, I think we were 4-12. But Deshaun broke the passing record, single season yards that year. Hell, he was up there for touchdowns. Like, he was up for offensive player of the year. I mean, we demolished every passing record there was that year. And we didn't have nowhere near the talent. Hell, we didn't have D-Hop. We had guys hurt in and out. Randall Cobb was, older, didn't run as well, but stayed hurt. Like, we didn't have nowhere near the amount of guys that we did in 2019, and we were still successful because you put him in an offense that he knows, that he truly believes in, that he knows the reads. He can run it with his eyes closed. The dude can go make plays. I promise you that. And he throws the ball. He has accuracy. He can sling it. But when he's in an offense like this, it is night and day. I'm telling you, everything from the time you open the playbook, it looks like Chinese to English, and you're like, oh shit, I don't know Chinese. So it's like, I mean, it's totally different.
China.
Yeah, China.
Love it, dog.
That. Wow. Okay.
I'll leave that last part alone. They can own.
Yeah.
But he was good. He was playing consistently, and the NFL was different. Like, I can't stress that enough. 2020 was entirely different than 2024 is in the way the game is being played, which is why like scoring is way down to the point where people are like suggesting, Mel Kiper suggesting they need to outlaw cover 2 to Tony.
The most insane thing I've ever heard.
Tony Kornheiser, who I love dearly, suggesting that missing field goals should be a minus point, and that field goals from within a certain distance should be worth 2. Because they're so used to seeing so many people score all these points, and they're not. Like, there is a real change going on, and like, people have to understand how this is going on, what's happening, and we're going to see the teams are able to adjust. Minnesota has been able to adjust. The New Orleans Saints have, at least for 2 weeks, did a nice job in getting out ahead of this and being able to generate points. But like, some teams are not, and the Browns are one of those teams right now. They got to get this figured out. But I mean, I can't with the amount of excuses you're trying to provide Watson, because if Watson honestly doesn't believe in the offense that they're running, they should bench him immediately. Like, at that point, I'm done.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, you're watching The React. Make sure you hit like and subscribe. Tell a friend to show up every Wednesday night at 8 p.m. or just tune in when you can, as it's available always at the youtube.com/Orange and Brown Report. We appreciate it. You guys tuning in. All right, next video is one of our favorite guys on the show, Joey Ratone. He's one of our favorites, and he's not. Don't tell me. I wasn't trying to. World's fastest fat man. He's hot on this one. He's heated. So we get to listen to some Joey here for a little bit tonight, which is always a treat.
Is his answer Zaire Mitchell-Payton, playmaker?
I don't believe so. But he does talk about the sequence that I wanted to bring up here. So
fair enough.
into the tape, I can confidently say to you that the Cleveland Browns are a bad football team with a lot of really good players. And that's the only way to really describe them. This was a complete failure from the coaching staff trickling down through the roster. No, Deshaun Watson as a whole was not good. He was actually much worse than I originally thought, and it makes me very ashamed to have believed that he could have passed for 300 yards. I mean, realistically, he could have, but he missed a lot of open throws yet again. He was not processing the game fast enough.
Pause this one.
And
that play is the one where, for whatever reason, and I don't know what the answer is. I'd love to
Elijah
know.
Moore?
Yes, where Deshaun Watson made it seem like Elijah Moore was not where he was supposed to be.
But he overthrew him the other way. He was pointing this way, but he overthrew him the other way. That's what doesn't make sense to me.
So, and that's what I'm saying. I don't know what the answer is, but it certainly sounds like Deshaun thought there was a miscommunication. Now, even at the time, I was sitting there going, man, they needed that play. They needed that play.
They had to have it.
And I wish I had a good answer for that. If there was a question to ask in the press conference, I would have loved to have known post game or whatever, what that particular play, what the problem was there. But that one obviously hurt quite a bit.
Yeah, because the ball wasn't even close to him.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like I said, clearly he thinks Deshaun Watson is gesturing like he thought Elijah Moore was supposed to be somewhere else.
Yeah, but he's gesturing like this. So I'm like thinking, oh, he thought he was going to come across the safety's face or something, but the ball was wide to the right of where he was. So like you said, we don't have the answer, but I don't know. Anyways,
that is sort of regardless of the result of that, it does sort of highlight the communication aspect, where if you are reading this, they've got to get that on the same page. Now, again, it's not as if they didn't have read concepts in last year's offense. They just give the receiver more agency and self-determination in this offense. So that can lead to some things where you get the quarterback reading one thing, the receiver reading another, and it looks real bad. And it could potentially be the receiver. Now, this, I don't know. That's why I'd love to know.
Yeah, exactly.
Good moments here and there, particularly when he was scrambling later on in the game, but it was too little too late, and the defense didn't show up until the third quarter. To me, this performance boils down to one thing: a lack of emphasis and focus on the fundamentals. This was a complete team loss.
The music got way more positive than it probably should.
So let's start with the offense. An offense is like a car with a manual transmission. You can't get straight into fifth gear. You've got to add a little gas and work your way up from 1 to 5. Sure, when you get great field positioning because a bounce goes your way on a fumbled kickoff return, and you have one-on-one coverage with a great route runner in Amari Cooper, you can take your shot right there. Unload it, let it go. Use that launch control and jump out to a fast start and a good lead. But that success that you experienced in that moment was not because you eased in and created a rhythm. It was just the right time and right place because a bounce went your way. This team regularly talks about respecting their opponents, but they didn't enter this game respecting the Giants. Outside of all the word salad that gets said in press conferences, they did not come in respecting the Giants. They thought they'd be able to get a nice tune-up game to be able to push around the Giants' front seven so they could start establishing the run in ways that they haven't been able to throughout the year. They thought that they'd be able to just drop Deshaun back and that the Giants wouldn't be sending pressure because they hadn't done it up to this point in the year. The Browns did nothing to slow down the Giants' pass rush and
go back to that clip. Now, obviously, everybody's attention is going to be on what's going on here, on the front. Watch the receivers.
Run in ways that they haven't been able to through. This team regularly talks about respecting their opponent.
Sorry, I'm trying.
They did not come in respecting the Giants. They thought they'd be able to get a nice tune-up game to be able to push around the Giants' front seven so they could start establishing the run in ways that they haven't been able to throughout the year. They thought that they'd be able to just drop Deshaun back and that the Giants wouldn't be sending pressure because they hadn't done it up to this point in the year.
Yeah.
The Browns did nothing to slow down the Giants' pass rush and blitz packages. And when you pair that with the first half defensive performance, there is no wonder why they were getting slapped around. As I mentioned, you cannot put this loss on any one player because the team as a whole was playing very, very poorly. However, Deshaun Watson had another game where you are left scratching your head as to what he is seeing and doing on the football field. He got back to his week 1 trait of locking in on one guy and becoming totally blind to the rest of the concepts against favorable matchups that were happening on the field. He was staring down checkdowns. Watch this play as he stares down Jerome Ford when pre-snap he knew he had 2 quick outs at the bottom of the field. Maybe because at this point he was getting hit.
Yeah, I don't. This part I don't get, right. Like either way, it's a gain of 3 yards.
You guys were covered.
Yeah, I mean you can throw it out there, but the easier throw is right in front of you, so I don't really care about that, right?
So much that he just wanted to create a positive play on first down, but this is becoming a common occurrence and not an anomaly. Then there are other moments where he was just flat out missing throws. These got progressively worse through the first half and peaked in the third quarter.
Here's another thing. Go look at that. Look at what he's dealing with on this throw. Yeah, you're going to say Deshaun Watson missed this throw. Look at what he's dealing with as he's trying to make it. I think
he was getting hit so much that
his lap.
This one?
Whatever one he was saying, he was saying missing throws, the first one he shows, like Deshaun Watson is like literally he's throwing with a guy in his chest.
Yeah. So so let's watch this one and then we'll watch it from here. He's getting to the point where the one part I want to talk about.
Pre-snap, he knew he had 2 quick outs at the bottom of the field. Maybe because at this point he was getting hit so much that he just wanted to create a positive play on first down. But this is becoming a common occurrence and not an anomaly. Then there are other moments where he was just flat out missing throws. These got progressively worse through the first half and peaked in the third quarter.
He looked like he got swallowed up by a wave in the ocean.
I'm not here to defend Deshaun Watson. Like, come on. I do not enjoy this man. But like, at what point are we sitting here going, come on, man, we got to at least be realistic. That was preposterous. The center is in his chest.
He did get swallowed up so fast on that one. All right. I couldn't even identify where he was supposed to go before he got tackled on the replay twice. All right, so I think he's getting to the part where
sailed a ball over Jerry Jeudy's head out of bounds.
Okay,
sailed a ball.
All right, he wasn't open. Jeudy wasn't open on that play, so I'm not talking about this. There's a series. Okay, after the fumble in the second half. Okay. And I believe one of the throws includes that Elijah Moore throw we were talking about.
Yes.
They fumbled that series. He misses in the dirt by like 15 yards in front of Cooper on an out. He misses Cooper for a first down high and wide, way high and wide. And he misses Moore on that one. And they were in their territory. They got the fumble in field goal range. He took a sack on third down. I think there's a penalty involved too. But either way, like that series was so bad. And he missed some throws that were there that you got to make when they had a chance to go. I mean, that fumble gave them real life in that game. And he just missed on all 3 of those. I'll give him the Moore one. Maybe was a miscommunication, whatever.
I mean, again, we just don't know the answer. I wish we did because he clearly gestures like something's weird, and it might be him. Maybe he's the one who's wrong there. But like ultimately, that's all. I would love clarification on that type of thing. And that's
Yeah.
I suppose one of the frustrating elements of this offense from that standpoint is there are too many things where you can't just say, I know what is happening. Like this is a, whatever concept type thing. There are multiple moving parts, or you can sort of have different variations of what the truth is. And we don't know, but it obviously through the course of the game, that was a huge play.
Yeah. And then, so here you get, I think he's going to show a couple of the other ones that were in that series here.
Over Elijah Moore, which would have been a touchdown down the seam. Then the next play sailed a ball over Amari Cooper's head on a crossing route that would have created a first down.
That was awful.
There's really no justification that any Watson fanboy can make. It's just bad football. It's regardless of who is back there, it is just bad quarterback play. A lot of this failure to produce consistent offensive performances comes down to identity and philosophy. One thing that drives me crazy watching this offense is that almost every route concept is vertical. It's a lot of deep curls, comebacks, seams, return routes. When Watson was in Houston, he was known for stretching the field deep. He had guys like Will Fuller who were blowing up secondaries constantly because of his pure speed and Watson's ability to stretch the ball downfield. And this has been the shift that we've seen in the offense this season with a lot more empty shotgun sets. They're trying to recreate the environment that Watson thrived in Houston. They want to stretch the defense and open up possibilities for explosive plays. Here are the issues, though. He's not hitting these throws vertically downfield unless it's to Amari Cooper down the sideline, and the offensive line is not protecting consistently enough for Watson to feel comfortable to be able to hit these throws. Additionally, when he does get the time and the receivers win on these routes, he is not getting the ball out soon enough. He's completely apprehensive and not anticipating the breaks.
That's the one I was talking about earlier.
Yeah, you can see him take an extra hitch. And that's the stuff where like to be on the fly on the wall in the quarterback room, when they're going over this type of stuff, because I would love to hear the coaching points that they're talking about, because it may well be that he's saying you can't take that hitch. Like the ball's got to come out. You taking that extra hitch is why you get that sack. Those are clearly covered, whether it's this play or any play, those are the conversations that are happening.
Yeah, I hope so.
Though, in general, about the ball's just got to come out quicker, and they've got to have more options to do that. But like Ken Dorsey flat out said, like he wanted to put together an offense that was more explosive down the field. And I remember a guy named Brad Ward complaining that week one, the Browns never attacked downfield. And now they're doing it. They listen to Brad, and now he's getting criticized.
Guy's an idiot. What an idiot that
guy
is.
They've got to find the sweet spot. And like here's the problem. Like you can have deep. Well, let's start here. Look how deep the safety is. Like God only knows where the line of scrimmage was. It may have been back up at the 40, but regardless, you're getting like Greg Williams ahead of his time in terms of the angel position. This is sort of what the landscape looks like. Everything is sort of kept over the top. Now, again, what I was going to say is you can have guys attack down the field, but you can also have guys short too. You can do all of these things at once. You don't have to do one or the other.
He's got a check down right here. And he's got Judy open.
Yeah, it's
on a comeback.
This has got to come. Ball's got to come out. No. Whether it's back here, back behind, or to the sideline, that ball's got to come out.
Yeah.
Now, having said that, DeJuan Jones got killed.
He did. He got smoked off the line. And
again, the knee was not good. That was the evidence of it. Mike, I was critical of DeJuan Jones in week one, but I went back and watched him just against Micah Parsons. He was remarkably effective.
Yeah, in pass protection, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, he was. All right. We'll go a little bit longer here with Joey.
Anticipating the breaks from the receivers. What I am about to say is not in defense of Baker Mayfield or Joe Flacco or any Browns quarterback not named Deshaun Watson. But this team has been at its best when they've been able to move the pocket and when there have been route concepts that break across the center of the quarterback's vision. It makes defenses have to chase fast athletes across the field, and it makes it so defensive backs can't just squat and drive. People want to talk about the Browns receivers can't create separation. A lot of that is because they run the same 3 routes over and over and over and over. In 2020,
all right, I disagree. There was plenty of separation in this game. There was guys open. At times there was not, but like to say that they're not getting separation as a whole, as a blanket statement, I disagree with.
Well, here's the problem with the argument. Who are the Giants out? They play a 3-4. Who are their outside linebackers? Kayvon Thibodeau and Brian Burns, very athletic.
Yes.
They are going to get up. What did they do? All they did was get up the field every play.
Yes.
They just happened to then turn and get around and then pressure from there. But like, if you're trying to roll out the pocket, like that would have been challenging to do against those guys because they could have then just widened out. I mean, one of the things that sort of caught up with the Browns and Baker Mayfield was teams started taking it away. They, obviously at some point, everybody goes, hey, they're moving the pocket. Let's do something about this. And they came up with answers. Now, to his point, yes, I would like them to be able to move the pocket too. But it's tough when you've got one giant right tackle with a bum knee, and you've got another tackle who is his first start, who looked, I mean, it just looks disinterested at times. It's not easy to do some of these things, and the opponent's going to try to take them away. But to his point, I think at some point, there comes a time when you just get caught in this vacuum. I mean, I always get called the Joe Woods defender, but one of the things I really liked about his defense was
I hated Joe Woods.
that when they had Myles Garrett and Clowney really cooking, they would just fly up the field and they were trying to force everything back in, and then they would have a bunch of guys. They would have all their personnel inside to sort of, one, take away the run in the middle, or two, they would try to create a bottleneck and then close it. And there was nowhere for the quarterback to go. And that Bears game where the Browns just absolutely dominated was the perfect example. But when the Browns were good in 2021, that was what they were doing, is they would just send those guys way up the field as fast as they could to take away the ability to get outside, don't get reached, and then keep everything in, and then have, them close down and then the middle come up. That is what you're ultimately going to get in these types of situations, or you're going to get situations where they start, and the guy they would use, who I think is leading their team in sacks, is Jason Pinnock, who they bring as a safety. And if they're going to get a tendency on where they're going to roll him, they're just going to send him as the extra guy. And Pinnock, I believe, did have a sack in the game. So, yes, I would like to do more things in terms of moving the pocket and some of these other things he's talking about. And I think the Browns ultimately in the second half started figuring out some stuff with protections that was more effective. But it's difficult when your offensive line is as beat up as it is. And it really is a problem. That's why they desperately need Jack Conklin to come back healthy. That's why they need DeJuan Jones's knee to be healthy. That's why they need better play from Ethan Posick. They are really, because what happens is you get into a situation where people are just going to attack the center and attack the interior of the offensive line with stunts. I mean, defensive pressures are designed to attack the protection. They're not worried about the quarterback. They are entirely designed to frustrate protections. And the guys, for the most part, are athletic enough that they can sort of get to the quarterback and put pressure on him at that point. And to the extreme outliers, to Lamar Jacksons and stuff, you have to have a bigger plan than that. But ultimately, a lot of it is just trying to give the line problems. And for things that we've talked about, the NFL, relative to where defensive talent is, and defensive line talent and edge talent and all these things, offensive line talent has never been worse. And it's not limited to the Browns, it's across the league. I saw Steve Palazzolo put out a stat that said the quarterback rating this year against the against the blitz is like 54.3, which is like a precipitous decline over the last couple of years. Everybody sucks against the blitz right now. So that is the other thing that's sort of working with this. But a lot of this just comes down to health. But yeah, they've, as I'm going to say, the biggest thing the Browns need to do, play better.
Yeah. Maybe Jim Schwartz should take a page out of everybody else's book for his changeup.
Well, it's weird that like Jim Schwartz is frustrating to me because like people were ready to make him the head coach last year. And I was like, just wait. You're going to get to a point where you're going to be like, I hate this. It's not that it's bad. It's just that inherently not everybody's going to be in love with the risk reward that's the proposition that he brings. That's what he does. But I agree with you. I would have liked to have seen I'd like to see more of what those changeups and things look like. Now, obviously in the second half, they did better. But I would, I like the fact that they want to get out and be aggressive, but I would love, like within the same series, for them to just shock the offense by not doing anything other than just rushing forward and playing back and seeing what kind of results they get doing that type of thing. And to this point, Jim Schwartz seems uninclined to go that route. And there were any number of times, JOK, one good example where like they got exactly what they wanted. Daniel Jones immediately forces the ball out to the running back on the sideline as the check down. JOK just had to stop and tackle him, and it would have been a loss for like 5 yards. Instead, he dives, misses wildly, and allows it to be a gain of like 2 or 3 or something like that. But like that's hidden yardage. That's 8 yards potentially that you lose by not making that play. And that stuff drives me nuts. The amount of missed tackles they had in good opportunities. Like the plays that are there for them to make is what's irritating to me. And, obviously I heard Myles Garrett talk about in the press conference. He highlighted that, like the amount of missed tackles and some of these other things that happen. So we'll see. If it gets better. I have major concerns about defensive tackle here again. That's why, to me, I think in some respects it's starting to look Joe Woods-ish at times on defense for the same reason it did when Joe Woods was here. You're not getting the consistent pressure from the defensive line. Obviously, Dalvin Tomlinson's still working his way back from the knee scope. Shelby Harris is playing pretty well. Quentin, but when you're not getting the obvious pass situations, Quentin Jefferson is borderline worthless.
Yes, yeah.
Maurice Hurst was abysmal before he got hurt, and they're still missing. Obviously, they're missing Hurst because he's hurt. They're missing Mike Hall because his situation's still unresolved. So that is hurting them. I'm hoping that those guys, both Tomlinson is healthier, Shelby Harris hopefully continues to play well, that they get Hurst back, that they get Hall back, and those guys can contribute and improve the situation.
And I would be ignorant to pretend that they're not doing this to some degree, but to me, the best coordinators or game planners on the defense, they alter their game plan every week in a way that, is for the opponent. So, like to your point where you would just like to see them sometime go out and not blitz the house and try to get home with 4 and totally surprise the other team. Yes, that should be an option. There should be multiple different, you know what I mean? Like, instead of this is who we are, we're going to live by it, die by it type of mentality that we get from him, where oftentimes now they are dying by it because there's enough on tape that teams know that if they press the perimeter with stuff, easy stuff, that they can, like the Giants did, they can win. It's very eerily similar to what we saw in the Texans game in the playoffs.
Yeah, you know what I haven't seen that I'm very curious to see. What play stands out to me is the Jets game last year where Ronnie Hickman made that pick and scored, and it was because the quarterback assumed that Hickman was going to be somewhere he wasn't, and he just fooled him. They just absolutely fooled him, and we haven't really seen that. We almost saw it against the Giants, if not for that personal foul. But like after, and it was Hickman again.
It was.
Other than that, we sort of didn't see much. And again, Brian Daboll deserves a ton of credit. Daniel Jones deserves a ton of credit. But I do feel like the defense just needs to be better, and I think they need to be. Yeah, I mean that part is true. I mean, Jim Schwartz's mantra is, if I make one play in the backfield, sack, tackle for loss, then I've ended their drive effectively. And he's not wrong, and that's usually how it works. But it is risk reward. When you risk to try to make those big plays, then the potential reward is that for the risk is that you're going to get beat on something, which happened this past week, obviously happened in the Houston playoff game. And as they face more quarterbacks that are good, not that Daniel Jones played well, which is problematic in itself, but they're going to face better quarterbacks, and those guys are going to theoretically have better answers than some of the guys they played last year. So we shall see. Hopefully they, as I want the offense to continue to evolve and get better, I'm hoping the defense evolves and continues to get better.
All right, we're going to go to just a clip here of Deshaun today, just because I wanted to get Pete's thoughts on this answer.
A little extra film work with the receivers, extra walkthroughs, just communicating on the sideline a little bit better, all those things.
Using that 4th and 1 play where it seemed like Jordan was open and you ran the ball, to make the case that you're not seeing the field well this season. So my question to you is, are you seeing the field well, and maybe what are other people not seeing on that particular play?
Because other people are not in the film room, so that not everyone know exactly what the read was. That was a decoy, so that's the difference. Everyone can pause the tape and say, hey, he should have thrown it here, should have thrown it here. Every quarterback deal with that. So
all right, hold on.
Okay. There's a lot. Okay, let's start here. He's right. We don't know what the reads are. We don't know what their keys are. And all of that is true. I would also argue
right at him.
I would also argue that I would be very surprised if Kevin Stefanski or Ken Dorsey yelled at him for completing the pass to Jordan Akins and getting the first down. That's all. And look, I've coached in offenses where we have decoy routes. They're decoy routes until they aren't. And there are plays where at some point that particular that route or that concept is open where you don't expect it to be based on what you do, and you still want them to throw to that route. Like normally they have, certain things where you're just always expecting to be this, but teams overplay the thing that they expect you to do, and you've got to counter it. So like I said, he's right. I don't know what they're being coached to do. All I can say is at the end of the day, if Deshaun threw that ball to Jordan Akins and he caught it and they converted the first down, I suspect Kevin Stefanski was not going to bench Deshaun Watson. That's all I'm going to say. I don't think he was going to be admonished for throwing that ball to Jordan Akins in that particular situation. Even as I know, I agree with him. This does happen all the time. Everybody's going to second guess. They have access to the film. They don't know what the reads are. I freely admit it. But I'm going to tell you, I don't think the coaching staff is going to yell at him if he completes that pass to Jordan Akins and the draft continues. That's my hot take.
Yeah, I would 100% agree with you. I would also find it strange that the most baffling part about that play, and I don't want to get too hung up on it because to your point, I guess he was just a decoy. But he was staring at
I'll
him.
take his word for it. I'll take his word as a decoy route. But here's the thing: that by virtue of them overplaying the Jerry Jeudy route, either by design or accident, that was all that was there. I don't know if there was another receiver on the play.
Decoy for what, though? Because if you look at the play, there's no other option. Was the decoy for him to fake throwing to him and then run? Was that the play?
No. So I think what he's trying to say is that, like, the Akins route was supposed to hold the defender on the outside and create leverage for Jerry Jeudy to get inside.
Okay.
So you see on the play, for people who know, who have watched this, like there's a guy covering Jerry Jeudy, but there's a guy who inadvertently just runs into him because he's actually trying to get out to Jordan Akins and he can't. So that's where, you sort of go, yeah, I understand why this is sort of like a guy who's trying to pull this guy out of the box to then allow Jerry Jeudy to be open. I know Deshaun talks about they ran this at a different point and it was there. But like here again, that happened. You had these guys, boom, smack in the middle of the field. Jerry Jeudy's locked up by two guys. Jordan Akins is the only other guy out there. Even if he's a decoy, fine, whatever. But he's the guy who's open. He's the guy who's there. And that was a hell of a lot better than trying to scramble in the circumstance you made. Because like initially on the play, it's an RPO. He pulls the handoff and keeps it. 100% to me, the right decision based on what I saw on the play.
Yeah.
Clearly, everybody's, he's saying it. Everybody's acknowledging that Jerry Jeudy's the primary on that. He's pulling it as he's looking at Jerry Jeudy. As soon as that collision happens, okay, if Jordan Akins is the decoy route, I suspect if you throw it at him, he's looking at you, he will catch it, and we move the ball. And Kevin Stefanski will have to hold his rage until after the game that you made that play, and then move on. I don't.
He does.
I don't
He does.
because I don't want to be trying to because I don't know what the answer is in terms of what they're being coached, but I don't find this helpful for his case. And here, if the Browns had won this game, the Browns are 2-1, and he has this back and forth, and he says this, I think there's probably still people who are going to be hard on him because he's not playing well and all the other stuff. But the fact that they're 1-2, it's easy to get hung up on this stuff. And I don't think it's because I think normally Deshaun Watson is very good in press conferences. I know a lot of people think he isn't. I actually think he's pretty good in press conferences. He's very good at trying to answer the question as best as he can, trying to be thoughtful. And I think overall, I agree with his point about it's very easy for us to say, well, you should have thrown the ball here. He's right. It's easy for anybody to pull up any film and say, you should have done this. I'm just saying that I don't think he was going to get yelled at for completing that ball to Jordan Akins and continuing the drive. That's all.
Agreed.
So he can tell me you can say, this is the read and this is the design. I think this would have been a better question for Kevin Stefanski. I would love to know what Kevin Stefanski would have said, not Deshaun Watson. Not because I think Deshaun Watson is wrong, but I'd rather hear it from the coach than necessarily the player.
Yeah. Me too. Yeah.
I bet I know what Kevin Stefanski would say. I'm not going to get into that. I'm not going to get into individual play calls. But here again, I think it's a better question for Stefanski than Deshaun Watson, in part because it's such a loaded, not really a loaded question. It's a loaded. I don't think anybody has a half opinion on Deshaun Watson, one way or the other. I think everybody's pretty firmly established in the camp of they either like him or don't like him, and they're basically just working on the premise of if he plays well, I'll roll with it, and he's not, so it becomes easy to sort of pile on him. Again, I don't think this is a helpful answer.
Yeah. And if you gave Stefanski truth serum, I'm sure that, to your point, I don't think he would be like, if he sees the guy falls down and throws it to the guy wide open on the other side of the first down marker, I don't think we're having an issue.
Well, let's make a more dramatic example. Let's say Jordan Akins is running 40 yards down the field wide open, and this, or 10 yards or whatever. He's got a wide open lane to the end zone. Are we going to say, are we going to say, well, that was the decoy route. Can't throw it. And that's ultimately where I think you immediately sort of collapse this argument onto itself and go, well, he is the open guy. Maybe we should throw him the ball. The play broke down. We talk about in terms of improvisation. We talk about extending the plays. That's ultimately what these things are, where the play is broken down. if Jerry Jeudy getting collision is the play breaking down, make something happen. Jordan Akins is right there to throw the ball.
Yeah. All right. Let's proceed here to our final video of the night. Actually, I think we have time for both, Pete. Let's do both.
I can, yeah.
All right. Here we go.
Flat. And that brings us to my beloved Raiders, as I still sit in the T-shirt because I don't deserve to wear nice things.
Raiders.
I still sit in the T-shirt I wore as I watched my favorite team come out completely flat. And this is not a new thing. This is multiple times over the last several years. I've watched the Raiders take on a losing team. They're bringing a backup quarterback, and they've lost that game. This is part of the DNA. I admit, Frank, I thought that Antonio Pierce, who we all acknowledge is really a motivational coach, would come out and would give these guys the fire of the gods that they needed to come off of a huge win against Baltimore and still have that pop. They did not have that pop. Max Crosby, also, we find out after the game, the extent of the injury, but was battling an injury that had him questionable, a high ankle sprain. We find out later he's going to have to manage that. Without him, it just wasn't, he was on the field, but he wasn't himself. In fact, there were no celebrations after big plays. You could tell that he was laboring through it. And without that energy, the entire team looked flat. And I kept watching this thinking, have I mistaken the energy of the Raiders as being Antonio Pierce when in fact it's just simply Max Crosby? And if that's the case, that's damning. So for the second time in 3 weeks, the Raiders don't look particularly good. They don't look particularly fired up. They got their butts kicked by Andy Dalton and the Carolina Panthers in just a thorough 36-22 is the final score. That includes garbage points that don't belong. And it was an embarrassing effort from the Raiders from the very first drive to the end of the game. It was one of those go get a paper sack, wear it on your head, and stop admitting you're a fan because this team just disappointed you to that level sort of games.
Yeah, I know. We'll get to, I do want to talk about the Panthers because we have to. Who Bryce Young? Yeah, that'll be an interesting conversation. But I do want to talk about Antonio Pierce. We've been texting about this. Your take on the press conference afterwards. I watched the whole thing during the Sunday night game, and he was pissed off. Like, you could tell. But what is your take on it? Because I do have one.
Well, let everybody hear first. This is the soundbite that's sort of taking the world by storm. And this is a moment where he was asked by a reporter about the effort of the team. This is what Coach Pierce had to say.
That the team just didn't seem to show up tonight.
No, they didn't. I think as the game went on, I don't think it was a team. I think there was definitely some individuals that made business decisions, and we'll make business decisions going forward as well.
I mean, Frank, when you hear that, business decisions, let's be clear. He's saying that guys decided not to make tackles, guys decided not to put their bodies at risk. It was some of the worst defensive effort I've seen from the Raiders in the last couple of years. When you talk about bad angles, bad tackling, just consistently slow play, it was terrible. But when you make that comment as a coach,
it's so crazy. This is a Raiders team that just beat the Ravens, right?
True. Not what you want to be saying as a coach week 3. Long season, and you're already here. Not great. Now, will he follow through on that and hold those guys accountable? And will the team sort of back his play there? And will it get results? If it does, it could be a positive for the Raiders. And if the Raiders are willing to sort of see this through with Antonio Pierce and sort of allow him to mold a team that is going to play Antonio Pierce style football, maybe it can be successful. But if it's happening in week 3, if we're revisiting this in hopefully after week 4, if we're revisiting this in week 7 again, if this continues to be a thread, then I don't think this is going to end well for him, considering that was what, the big thrust of hiring Antonio Pierce was all the players love to play for him. The players really like what Antonio Pierce brings in terms of the energy. And that is not a good and they may sincerely believe that they love this guy and everything he's doing, but if they don't play that way, the ownership may ultimately go a different direction. Now, part of the reason Antonio Pierce was hired is because he was cheap, and the Raiders are currently paying, I think, 53 head coaches. So it made it easy to sort of go this route, but it also makes it easy for them to not stay with this route that he's cheap. But like I said, I'm very curious to see how they want to take this through. If they allow again, if they allow Antonio Pierce to really see this through and build a team of guys that is going to be able to play his style of football, so be it. The problem is you're doing professional football here, and this is sort of the business you have chosen. It's not like high school or college where you can, even college has changed in this regard. You can't recruit your own guys like you could before. Ultimately, maybe you might need a couple drafts and a couple off seasons. Yeah. He's got to get that far. And again, if this is happening in week 3 and this continues to be a theme, that's really troubling for you in terms of getting there. But we'll see. Maybe they will respond. Hopefully in week 5. Starting in week 5 would be a great time for them to start really getting after it, really bringing the effort. Week 4, maybe you still make some business decisions, slow your roll. But I'm just very curious to see how this plays out. Like, I am not convinced that Antonio Pierce is necessarily a good coach. I think they've done a lot to try to help him in terms of they've got a lot of consultants who I believe includes Hugh Jackson, which okay. I know Marvin Lewis is there.
Like to hear that.
They've got I think a guy with a couple Super Bowls in there to try to help him develop as a head coach and sort of be able to be a sounding board and sort of make these things. So I'm sort of curious to follow this along and see how it happens. Hopefully they wait till after week 4 to really deliver that message and to start holding guys super accountable for lack of effort. In week 4, they sort of continue to do their thing. But in the landscape of professional sports and just the Raiders in general and how their ownership is operated, I'm very curious to see if they're willing to do this, because you sort of get in this thing where you do the opposite of what you did before. Antonio Pierce is clearly the opposite of Josh McDaniels. So we'll see how long it lasts. If this message gets through and ultimately they play a more competitive style of football, that was an embarrassing loss coming after, that is one of those things where it sort of almost wipes out beating the Ravens, which is really unfortunate. That was a great win for you. That could have been a program building win type thing, but then to turn around and get beat at home by Carolina like that, it sort of invalidates it and sort of wipes it out in a way that's really unfortunate. And hopefully they're super down about it and that they can't recover until week 5.
Absolutely. Let's hope so. And it's always good, Marv and Hugh on the same staff. That's fantastic. I love to hear that. So, all right, let's get to our final video of the night. This is the Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show. For some reason, not in the, something happened to their studio or something. I don't know. But they are not in the studio, and they are talking about, did we overvalue the talent on this team? Before the season, I believe that's what it is.
All right, Bull, you ready for our final topic of the day?
I am.
Let's get down to it. We have talked about this Browns roster ad nauseum throughout the offseason. The 33rd team, when they were ranking their AFC rosters, put the Browns in 3rd. We all, and Dustin, you weren't here, so I exclude you from this. If you do not agree, then you are not lumped into this conversation. But we all said excluding the quarterback just because we didn't know about Deshaun Watson. Said the Browns had a championship-level roster entering the season. Through 3 games, we may have second opinions on that. Some of the guys we anticipated playing extremely well have not lived up to their billing yet. And it got me thinking, and G, I'll start with you when we go around the horn, Bull second, Dustin third. Has the Browns' lack of talent finally caught up to them? And is that a result of not having a first-round pick for the last 3 years? So on the one hand, it's your quarterback isn't playing at the elite level you thought, but also the consequences of acquiring Deshaun, where you gave those 3 first-round picks, and the Browns just kind of lack some of that talent that the other top teams in the AFC currently have. Is that a fair assessment, or am I overthinking this?
No, that's not a fair assessment, because the people that they drafted, there's guys that were on the board. Anthony Schwartz went over Amon-Ra St. Brown. Tristan Wirfs, you took Jed Wills. You whiffed on that. The people that you've picked, and there's guys that would have been competent picks in the 3rd or 4th round, or guys that were available. weren't available. They're not playing well. You take a look at Amari Cooper. Now he worked out in terms of trades, right? Elijah Moore was supposed to be giving us something at receiver. That trade, people will say, probably didn't work out in our favor. We got Jerry Jeudy. He's played pretty well for the first 3 games, but he's not a deep threat. Obviously, you got a lot of our best players are players that were here drafted by a different regime. And so I can't say if they would have got 3.
Wait, drafted by a different regime? Are we talking about John Dorsey?
He's literally no. He's actually he's talking about GMs before John Dorsey. He's talking about the Sashi Brown at this point.
So we're
and
talking
the
about
dude before him,
Garrett,
because he's talking about Myles Garrett. He's talking about Denzel Ward. He's talking about Joel Bitonio. This common thing, because he can't be talking about Nick Chubb or Denzel Ward would be in the Dorsey era. Now I would push back on that one and say you literally could not miss that pick. You go back and look at the draft. Unmissable. Everybody's outstanding that was there. Like up until he started crushing it for the Ravens, your best argument was that maybe Roquan Smith was the worst pick that they could have made. Like I said, unmissable. So yeah, I mean, this is preposterous. Saying Jerry Jeudy's not a deep threat. Like we've talked about this all summer, how him and Amari Cooper have led the league in deep receptions over the past couple of years.
Yeah.
It makes no sense. In general, could the Browns be hitting a wall at certain spots? Potentially. But overall, I just look at this as injuries. This is injuries that are the Browns have. We were hoping that the Browns were going to be able to come into this season healthy. They didn't. The carryover effect from last year has been miserable. The offensive line has obviously been miserable. We knew Nick Chubb was going to be a situation. We knew Jack Conklin was going to be a situation. The Jed's Wills thing was unexpected. I mean, most estimates had him healthy a couple months ago. Whatever went wrong with that obviously was a big problem. And then now you're down Wyatt Teller. Now you're down David Njoku. Myles Garrett was phenomenal on Sunday, and he is clearly in a substantial amount of pain. Denzel Ward has been limited in what he could do this year. He only played 11 plays against the Jags. Had to come off the field this past week with the shoulder. You've got a lot of guys. Maurice Hurst again is out. You've got a lot of guys that have been out with injuries. I mean, but that's the NFL, unfortunately. So if you were to tell me that Nick Chubb is back super healthy, that Jack Conklin is 100%, that Myles Garrett's not dealing with the litany of injuries he's dealing with, the team is, to me, is completely different than what they are right now. And Myles Garrett's still playing at a really high level. Now the combination of the injuries and just not playing well will give the impression that that they just don't have as much talent. But let's take Martin Emerson, who I believe was drafted by this regime. If I'm not mistaken, but G. Bush can correct me if I'm wrong. Is a good player. I don't think anybody doubts that Martin Emerson's a good player. But I think we do criticize that matchup being put on Malik Neighbors, because I just think from what Martin Emerson does well, that was an awful matchup for him to be on Malik Neighbors. To me, I think if you weren't going to have Denzel just shadow him, I think you had to have 2 guys watching him at all times. They didn't. And got punished for it. That is, you can criticize Martin Emerson for what he did, but Malik Neighbors is a legitimate freak, and the Browns just treated him like he's a normal receiver, and they got punished for it. So that makes you look less talented. I think JOK is tremendous, who I believe was drafted by this regime. I think Grant Delpit is terrific. I believe he was drafted by this regime. Alex Wright, struggling a little bit. I wish he was better. Obviously had the big safety against the Jags, but just in general, not playing particularly well. David Bell's season's already over. I want to see Cedric Tillman get better. I'm excited about Jamari Thrash, but like those aren't the guys you're necessarily counting on. Amari Cooper obviously came out slow, but G. Bush said it. I mean, Jerry Jeudy has played well. I like what Jerry Jeudy has brought to this team. David Njoku, Sashi Brown pick, being hurt. All summer he was the best offensive player on the team. He's been out. Like those things take a toll. You are missing guys who were carrying you last year, or just have not played well. And obviously, the quarterback's a huge part of that. Obviously, a good quarterback. Jaden Daniels is a perfect example in Washington. He is the tide that is lifting all boats right now as a 20-something-year-old rookie. So these are all things that make you look worse than you are. I don't doubt the talent, but I think all these things are making them look worse than they are. But that, the NFL doesn't feel sorry for you. That doesn't make your team bad. It just, the circumstances are what they are.
Yeah. And they did let Ward follow him in the second half, and he did a tremendous job on him. I don't think he caught another ball, or if he did, it wasn't for very much yardage at all. So, bad matchup. All right, let's listen a little further here.
3 first-round draft picks back, that somehow they would have capitalized on those picks, because I haven't seen them capitalize on the picks that they got now. Like, they haven't drafted studs that'll be like, oh my gosh, this guy's like, JOK is pretty good. I think
this narrative isn't so baseless though.
It just sounds ignorant. Like you're not paying attention to what they have. Like right now, JOK and Grant Delpit are 2 of your best defensive players. Like bar none, they just are. And they were
you have guys lined up to give extensions to. I mean,
yes. Now it's very easy to criticize Greg Newsome because everybody hates that he dances and all this other crap. I could care less. For the most part, he's pretty good at his job. Is he the greatest first-round pick ever? No. Do I think they could have made a better pick there? Probably not. I actually, you go back and look at it, it's probably still the pick. But to say they haven't drafted anybody stupid, DeJuan Jones is really good. Just hurt. Like, again, you go back, you can find the cut-ups of just on Twitter or whatever. You can go find the cut-ups of just DeJuan Jones and Micah Parsons. You're like, again, I had the same reaction. I was like, wow, he's really good at this. So like, again, this is the classic G. Bush. Andrew Berry did exactly what I want, and he sucks for it. Like, because that's what he did. Nobody, well, there are a couple people, maybe. Almost no one was pushing harder for Deshaun Watson than one G. Bush. And it was played his fake lawyer any number of times. And you're mad at it. So now you've got to defend this and say, well, they wouldn't have made the picks. Of course they wouldn't have made the picks. They couldn't have possibly made the picks. They couldn't have accidentally made good picks, even though you can point to all these picks that have been very good for them. Now you can criticize and say, well, they haven't been very good on offense. Okay. Like, I get it. They also haven't made picks high on offense either. So it's whatever. But clearly, I think overall, as the draft goes, the Browns are pretty average. I wish they were better. I still believe 2023 is going to turn out to be a really good draft for them. When they didn't have a first or second round pick after they traded down, I really like that process. I didn't love this past draft. Not as much talent. The board did not fall as kindly as it did. 2023 was magical in some ways for how well it how it fell to them. And I like it. Isaiah McGuire is another guy I like who's in that class in the 4th round pick. I like DTR. Again, if a week ago you and I were talking about, hey, if you can get this thing rolling, then you get this one against the Giants, and then you're talking about, well, they've got this thing going, and then they're going to get David Njoku back, and they're going to get Nick Chubb back, and hopefully Jack Conklin back, and all of a sudden you're going and just getting Amari Cooper to play well, play like Amari Cooper, which he did. That you're suddenly going to feel really good about the team, but they didn't. They got their ass kicked up front and did not play well, and now you don't, and now you're sitting there going, well, they must suck, and there are some real things they are going to have to address this offseason on the offensive line and some other things, potentially quarterback. Mm-hmm. But overall, I don't think anybody's going to be like, man, they've got to overhaul the defense. I think that's insane. They may just have
Yeah.
to continue to add there, but I think the Browns are, I think anyone watching the season can sit there and go, man, I wish the defense was playing better. I'm right there with you. The first half against the Giants was incredibly frustrating. But I think if you were to say, man, is anybody going to well, I have had people try to argue this, and the Browns defense is going to be pretty good for a while. It's just a question of how they continue to get forward, how some of these guys are going to age out. What are they going to do to sort of fill in some of these holes that they're going to have? But like, they've got a very young core that's going to be around for a while. And they're going to be good for a good bit. I'd be very hard pressed to see them just immediately fall off next year, for example. So they've got to really address, again, one side of the ball and get the things going. If they have a big offseason where they can draft a couple /sign / whatever linemen and get this thing rolling where they feel good about their front again, I think this whole thing change. Obviously, the quarterback position is going to be the biggest thing. Then everybody's going to feel better about this team. But you can live in an imaginary world where they've drafted no one at all of consequence, despite the guys they've drafted that have been extended. Everybody's thrilled for them to be extended. No one was questioning whether they should be extended, and then go, well, I guess they suck.
Yeah. The narrative from, how good this roster was to 3 weeks into, where now is just kind of wild. But that's the knee jerk, right? So this season is still very much salvageable. I know a lot of people don't want to hear that right now, but it's not over. They can put this together. They can pull this together. They happen to find an identity on offense, Pete, and find what works. It feels like they are throwing stuff at the wall sometimes, but if they can find that, I have no doubt that they can go win a bunch of games in a row at some point here and make this a fun season. So I mean, they have 14 games to play left. They've got to figure it out. There's a lot of issues and real talks they have to have, but by no means am I bailing on this season like we've seen a lot this week.
If they beat the Raiders, everybody's going to be talking about, well, maybe they can get it going. And obviously, I don't think there's quite the enthusiasm there has been, but like, how many times last year did people try to say the season was over, and then they went 11-6? So I can't recall the number of times people were like, or just thought the Browns were done in games, and then they came back and won those games. Hey, we saw it in Jacksonville. People thought that the Browns were going to lose that game, and probably should have, but they didn't. They figured it out enough to win the game. So look, they've got some structural issues that I don't think are going to go away, but ultimately I think they have very good coaching. That's just got to get it going. They've got to get healthier as much as they can, get a little bit of luck on that end, and they've just got to play better. And I think they can. If they get a win this week, suddenly we're back at 2-2 in a division where obviously the Steelers are 3-0, the Ravens are 1-2, and the Bengals are 0-3. Like, you've got an opportunity to sort of right the ship a little bit, get back on track, and see where you end up. I have no reason to believe. Like, I don't go into Las Vegas going, well, they can't beat the Raiders. I mean, come on. They clearly have enough talent to do that. They can get the job done. Now they are in a position where I think they are capable of beating anybody. I think they are in a position where they are certainly capable of losing to anybody. It just comes down to who's going to show up. And get it done, because they could have a dominant defensive performance this week, and score more points and get it going. And everybody's going to, let's say they dominate the Raiders, I think everybody's going to go, whoa, man, they figured it out. And suddenly we're talking about it. Now I think the quarterback is just going to sit there and linger forever. So much of that, even if Deshaun Watson were to come out and throw for 250 yards and a couple touchdowns, I don't think that's going to go away, because one, it shouldn't. He has to do it for an extended period of time, and two, because of who he is and what he brings. And he does suck the life out of people. He continues to be, in my mind, the NFL's biggest energy vampire, which is really frustrating because it does suck the fun out of it in some respects. But go get a win in Las Vegas. start to put things together. If they can start running the ball better, that would help.
Yeah.
Hopefully Zach Zinter plays well, and you're sitting there going, "Hey, I'm excited about Zach Zinter." Those type of things. There's a lot that can go well. If Zach Zinter is good, for example, and you've got DeJuan Jones, who I think is good, that's two young pieces on the line. You've still got Luke Whippler, and who knows how he's going to come back from that ankle. That's not an injury you want to have. You've got a couple guys that you can build around going into the future, and then you've got to address the other side, and obviously left tackle is going to be a big focus. But yeah, I like week to week league, year to year league, but more than anything, week to week league. Like for all the reasons that we're talking about, everybody's on top one week and then on the bottom the next. The Ravens are a perfectly good example of that. Being 0-2 was obviously unexpected. Losing the Raiders, I mean, you think the Giants loss is bad. That Ravens loss was horrendous. So we'll see what happens. They got to, they got to play winning football. That's all it comes down to. If they play winning football, I think they will. People will come around and potentially start. Hopefully, what we want to all see is the Kevin Stefanski brand of football we got last year. That endless reserve of effort, playing to the end of the game, every play for the guy next to you, that type of stuff. We want to see that again. And I thought, for all the, I had such mixed opinions watching the Giants game, because in the first half I was infuriated watching it, and then the second half, and particularly with Myles Garrett leading the way, I was like, wow, they are really starting to effort this thing, and they could win this game. I think when I think a lot of people thought when the Giants missed that last field goal, I think a lot of people thought the Browns were going to win that game, and they obviously didn't. But even at that point, for as bad as they had played, I think a lot of people were like, that was it. The Giants should have won the game there, and they didn't. The Browns are going to go and win this game. That is still there. So we'll see what happens when this week goes.
Agreed. Good stuff, Pete. Make sure you follow Pete Smith on Twitter @_Pete Smith _. Keep it locked on the OBR the rest of this week. We've got shows every night. We've got articles coming out always at the website, theobr.com. Pete's got great stuff. Go read him right now. And you can find all of that at the OBR Twitter timeline and theobr.com. Where you can access all of that good stuff. I'll be back tomorrow night for All Eyes on Cleveland with Casey. Thank you for tuning in. Hit like, hit subscribe, tell a friend. Keep coming back. Go Browns. Turn it around this week, baby. Come on. Stay positive. Let's do this. Thank you for watching the React. Any parting words, Pete?
Yes. Sign up for the newsletter. It's free. You get everything from the OBR. Obviously like and subscribe certainly helps us, but very easy way to get everything that's coming from the OBR without even thinking about it. Just sign up for the newsletter.
There it is. I'll put a link in the description below just to help out. Thank you guys for watching. For Pete Smith, my name is Brad Ward. We are out.